Good evening, and welcome to the Sanctum Secorum reading room. Whether you are new to the literary world of Appendix N, or a diehard fan of the genre, or just tuning in to see how certain titles tie into a particular set of role-playing games, we invite you to join us as we dive into the history and influence of Appendix N. We'd like to open our library to you and inspire readers to explore these new worlds. Allow me to introduce our keepers of mysteries for this evening. We have Keeper Bob.
Good evening, everybody.
And I'm Keeper Jen.
Hey, Jen.
And hello. As a reminder, since we are airing on Twitch tonight, we have channel points, so you can redeem those for things like weird facts or silly jokes. Keep it light and friendly here. And
Jen gives the jokes, I give the facts.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I know some. Okay,
You can give facts too, but you're not putting me on the rope for jokes.
No. Let's all do jokes, right? We also have a couple of giveaways coming up toward the end of our hour. But I mean, before we start waxing poetical about how funny or knowledgeable we are with certain things like channel points, because that's all silly, let's dive into some Appendix N, or at least some work by an Appendix N author. Tonight's work is the creator of the Empire of the East, Fred Saberhagen. And we are discussing, of course, the first book of Swords.
The first book of Swords are set, or the entire series really, is set in the far future, approximately 50,000 years before the story. Sometime during the third millennium, mankind was almost wiped out and driven to extinction by a global apocalypse brought on by a nuclear world war. That is, of course, prior to the events of Empire of the East. By the time the events recorded in the books of Swords occur, Ardna has passed into legend and is worshipped as a benevolent god. The gods of the Swords universe are based on various mythological deities, most coming from like the Greco-Roman and Hindu pantheons. And they are elements of human hope and imagination that were made real 1,000 years ago after the destruction of Ardna, when humans donned mask suits created by Ardna as a defense against demons. The gods, having become wholly bored with mankind after 1,000 years, created the 12 swords of power and scattered them through the world as a grand game of survival of the fittest to be played out upon the earth. And that is where we come in with the creation of the swords. And boy, oh boy, Fred Saberhagen.
It's been a while. It's been a while since I've read Saberhagen. It's been a very long time since we last read The Empire of the East, or any of Ardna's world. And it was 49,049 years that Ardna's.
Well, it was 49,999 years was the period of the change. They talk about
the initial sentence,
yeah,
right?
Ardna's change of the world lasted that long, and now we're like 3,000 years beyond that. So yeah, it's more than 50,000 years, and
but it was a treat. It was a treat to get back into something that was almost wholly fantasy, as opposed to, I mean, there wasn't much in the way of, say, a sci-fi element to this.
No, well, I mean, there's references, right? There's references.
There's references to previous works.
Well, there's references to bombing cities into dust.
Well, they did have.
They know their history.
They used to access, or they used to have access to things like guns.
Well, and someone does have a flashlight. I just want to point that out. Someone does have a flashlight. But let's talk a little bit about Fred first, right? Fred Saberhagen was born in 1930 and passed away in 2007. But like some of the coolest people, he's a native Chicagoan. His wife, as a matter of fact, it was a mathematics professor at Loyola University.
And she became an author herself.
Writing a fictionalized account of the life of the first woman to ever get a PhD in mathematics. And she's working on a sequel now.
That's just kind of bleak to me, that had to be a work of fiction as a maybe I'm reading too much into that.
I don't think necessarily the process of getting a PhD in mathematics is otherwise normally exciting. I mean, I don't know. You do have to defend a thesis, and so I suppose maybe in mathematics they use pulse rifles. I'm not sure, but yeah. So she's an author in her own right.
Joan Spicci, I believe.
Well, she writes
Is that how you pronounce?
I think so. She writes under her maiden name, but she is still Joan Saberhagen.
Right. It's JSS Publications or something like that.
Yep.
Is her business name. And he married her right after his first novel got published, The Golden People, which was 1964.
Right. Which, I mean, that was.
I got facts too. I know I'm right.
I know you got facts. I know you got facts. But you're talking about science fiction, of course. One of the things that he is best known for is the Berserker series, which has been described as a flying bird to the Turing test, among other things. But so it's really either through that or the swords that most people I know came to Saberhagen, as opposed to Empire of the East, which I came to later. And
interesting.
Okay. But he also wrote stories with Dracula. He wrote an entire series with Dracula, including one with Sherlock Holmes and Dracula.
I know. I haven't gotten into it yet. Sorry.
Which in the book is described as the case of the giant rat of Sumatra. But yeah, no, he was an electronics guy. I mean, he served in as an airman in the Korean War, and when he came home, he worked as an electronics technician at Motorola outside Chicago. And
now, that's really interesting. That must have been his early career, because the information I found on him that was most intriguing was that he worked as an editor for Encyclopedia Britannica, which of course piques my interest, right?
He did do that as well, yes.
He edited the chemistry articles. Who knew? And also wrote the article that Encyclopedia Britannica had on science fiction. And right after that, he quit and took up writing full time.
Well, and Joan also did some work for Encyclopedia Britannica. So I kind of wonder if that's perhaps how they met. But yes, he worked for Motorola in like the late 50s. He went over he went to Britannica in I want to say the late 60s.
67 to 73.
And then 73, that's when he became an author, a full-time author.
Yeah, and then just a year or two later, he and his wife moved to Albuquerque. They did the family thing while writing. He was in Albuquerque when he passed. This particular book was written in 1983, so just shy of 20, well, published, I should say. So it was written about 20 years after he started his first set of novels. And in total, Saberhagen has a total of 60 novels, 9 omnibuses, and 7 collections under his name. And that does not include things that he edited or collaborated on. That's a pretty impressive career.
And when you think about, the moment you realize that the Sword series takes place in the world of Empire of the East, right? It's all one long time stream. It's interesting, and I didn't even realize there was a 4th book in the Empire of the East series, And I didn't realize that because it wasn't published until like 2006. It was the last book published in his lifetime. It was Ardna's Sword. And it was after he
Oh,
was
wow.
done with the Swords and the Lost Swords books.
So
Um,
it's not one of the 12.
no,
Interesting.
I have no idea what I have not read Ardna's Sword, but now it's on my radar. Uh,
Right. So
in
many books, so little time.
And then in 2013, Final Sword Productions licensed the books of swords for a role playing game, but as far as I can tell, nothing ever came of it.
Hmm.
Final Sword Productions has stuff out like in the Honor Harrington universe. They've released some role playing stuff.
What year was that?
That was in 2013.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it could stand to reason that any potential licensing would have to have been renewed like 3 or 4 times by this point.
Right. Yeah. And there's, like I said,
Wow.
there's nothing out there. And
Mm-mm.
then in 2020, there's a Facebook group devoted to Fred Saberhagen's swords, and
Of course.
Joan posts there from time to time, not
Oh,
very
nice.
often. But in 2020, she mentioned that the books of swords have been optioned for a movie, but unfortunately, with the pandemic, everything was kind of up in the air. But it gives me
Figures.
hope that maybe we will someday see the books of swords come to the screen.
I'm a little, hmm,
I
I'm actually a little trepidatious about that. I don't know if they need like the Lord of the Rings treatment.
I don't think they need
It's
the
good
Lord of the Rings
fiction
treatment,
by
but they're not.
itself.
I don't think they need the Lord of the Rings treatment, but I think they would transfer well to the screen for the most part. Sure, there's
Potentially.
dragons and things of that nature, but most of the story really revolves around people. So,
Kind of. One of the longest descriptions we got was of the life cycle of a dragon, and that
and
was so
boy, they only knew part
fascinating.
of the story. Yeah.
That was really fascinating, and really cool to sink my teeth into, and dare I say, quite uh, gameable if we were going to be going that route.
Oh my
Uh,
goodness, yes. And they even named the different life cycles, right? Including like the great worm and the snake period. Yeah. Oh, it was
the
really
Landwalker,
interesting
yeah.
the way they change and change and change.
And that was right there up there. You're right up there. I'm sorry, I keep stumbling over my words tonight, guys. It was right up there with things like the Rain Wilds and the Live Ship Trader series by Robin Hobb that I love so much that I could totally just keep reading this entire series and discuss every one of the 12 books of swords and be happy.
Well, and the thing to keep in mind is while you're trepidatious about them being made into a movie, Fred Saberhagen originally started writing these with the idea of having them developed into a computer game.
What?
Yes, this is you have
What?
to look back at the early '80s. Games came out like Arthur C. Clarke's Rendezvous with Rama,
Oh man, with
The
those
Hobbit, all
early
these
bit
old.
graphics.
Yeah, they
Mm.
were they were text adventure games with still graphics, but that
Oh,
was a big thing, and it was seen as sort of the next big market for authors. And this was what he was looking at having produced in that fashion. It obviously never happened, and I can't find any record of them ever being licensed in that way. But that was his original plan.
for the entire story or just part of it? I
Well, when
ask
he
for a
when he
reason.
started, right? So for at
Okay.
least the first book, beyond that, who knows?
'Cause I was gonna say the prologue plus chapter one of the first book of swords equals a full story. I
Yes,
there's so much to keep you reading, keep you engaged, keep you chewing on that I admittedly listened to and read a few times. And
I
it just, I don't know, there were so many little touches that I would kind of go, oh yeah, I remember that from Empire of the East, or oh, I remember that from something I read in the Dungeon Crawl Classics Empire of the East there. Um, I just, yeah, I like this world a lot.
Well, and that first that prologue, there's that moment where we've had the description, the lame leg, the gray skin, but then he comes to the realization that he is Vulcan because the gods are not truly gods as we would understand them today. And so it is that memory of, oh, I'm a god, I am Vulcan, and this is what I do. And his tools, he has his tools and he has no other tools. I thought that was a lot of fun. He's like, well, I need to cut down wood, so I guess I'm going to go knock down some trees. God, an axe would be handy.
But
Smash, smash,
alas,
smash. And then he's ripping the wood apart. And
yeah,
when you look back and realize this is a guy in power armor, things make a lot more sense.
um, I didn't even look back at it that way, to be honest.
Well,
Uh,
because you don't have to, right? You can just take it as he's a god. But
even that,
he's a guy in a big suit.
maybe some sort of minor deity. I never really thought of him as a god until they started speaking of him as
Well,
such after
I
the
mean,
fact.
Vulcan's a god.
But even after they started speaking of him as such, when you're first reading that prologue, you're just thinking, wow, this is one bizarre individual.
Oh, see, for me, the moment he said, "I am Vulcan," he,
I I mean,
he's a
me
god.
with me with my podunk knowledge, um, fine, free trivia facts.
But
Uh,
I thought it was really interesting since the swords are created for this game, right? Because the gods are bored, and you see exactly how little the gods value humanity when Vulcan's like, yes, human sweat, pain, and fear. These are the things we need to strengthen the magics, and we will quench the blades in human blood. I'm like, oh yeah, that's these are not kind of benevolent gods.
no,
They are bored and capricious.
these are gods that you automatically want to lowercase as opposed to capitalized gods.
Well, because there's a specific meaning, capitalized G, God, and has nothing to do
Mm-hmm.
with gods. So yes.
But as a trite little individual, yeah, I have my editorial ways. I'm like, no, I don't like you. You don't get the capital G. Uh,
No named God gets the capital
no,
G. That's not the
no,
way that works.
yeah.
Capital G is a
But
Judeo-Christian thing.
it was also very interesting that uh, amid these other gods that we're introduced to, we also see call outs to easily recognizable ones that stem from other sources, like a, an old temple to Bacchus was spotted. And I found that very interesting, like a really interesting
Well,
author's choice there.
all of the gods are recognizable to modern day to our stuff, except of course from those that come from Empire of the East, Ardna, and to a lesser extent Drophet, right? Uh, who is definitely not a god, and they talk about his fur and everything. As a matter of fact, um, I went looking for information on Drophet. I'm like, he's a dog, right? He's obviously a dog. And I was like trying to figure out what type of dog he was. I'm like, maybe he's a golden retriever. And
Yeah.
Elena, if you could put the image up, Drophet is actually based on Tufard, who was Joan's dog when she and Fred got married. And he's like this. He's like this. I think he's like a type of bulldog or something. Uh, I'm not completely familiar, but it totally changed my view. Looking online, all the artists like this like werewolf wolfine thing with all the shaggy hair, and I'm like, no, he's small and adorable as a dog. So I mean,
Yeah.
But other than that, all of the gods are all very recognizable, and it gets really interesting when you see that they're getting frustrated. We're one book in, right, and they're getting frustrated halfway through the first book that the game is progressing so slowly that Hermes with his staff is flying around the world and taking a sword and putting it someplace else because the people aren't using it right. And so
Mm-hmm.
there's this game that they want to I mean they're using the sword essentially to like unbalance the world for their own entertainment, and they're frustrated that we're not destroying ourselves fast enough, and so they have to prod things along. So it's not really it's a rigged game to begin with. It's not really
Yeah.
a game,
You think?
right? It is dance humans dance and
Mm-hmm.
slay one another in new and interesting ways.
Well, is there a specific aspect of this game that you'd like to focus in on before we talk about the swords themselves?
Well, I want to say the larvae are terrifying. Um,
That's fair. That's totally fair.
but I don't know. For an aspect of the game, it's hard to say. There's players. There's the players on the field, right? There's the humans that have the swords. There's the people in the skyboxes, the gods, and then there's people like the emperor, who is playing his own game and moving things around and interfering, and
And the Duke
prophet, who's pissed
and
off about the whole thing. So I mean, there's these various layers to everything that's happening, and one book in, it's really hard to tell.
now I've got to say, with all of the layers and all of the factions and potential players in this game, it did feel a bit like, shall we say, the saga of Recluse.
I can see that.
Down to you're having this fun time and enjoying the character development and all of these fantastical bits, and here's the war tactics, and here's this. I'm like,
Well,
it was bound to happen.
I mean, the thing that I like about the Recluse novels is that the main characters always do something, right? They're a woodworker, they're a stonemason. They exist in the world around them. They're not just a wizard. And so here we start with a character who he's a blacksmith. Very briefly, he does not escape the prologue with both arms, and so he is a miller at the end of the prologue.
Hey, he was still doing stuff
Yeah,
though.
oh no, but he wasn't a blacksmith
George
anymore.
was George was one of my favorites.
And then the other thing to keep in mind is our protagonist is a 13-year-old boy, a 13-year-old boy with a really big sword. And I'm thinking, if they'd given Harry Potter a sword, things would have been very, very different.
Jeez, that's totally fair. Yeah, that's true. At least the characters in Recluse usually go until their time of, you know, turning into adult, but the age of coming of age.
And the other thing
This
is
this
that,
is a really harsh coming of age, I think.
well,
That
it is and it isn't though, right? It subverts a lot of expectations.
well,
I mean,
I don't know.
right at the beginning, his father and his older brother are dead, but
And
his father's not
mis
dead.
he has mistakenly murdered somebody
Right,
because
but
his arrow was guided by some
That,
profound
but
curse.
that's not what I'm talking about. It subverts the expectations of, okay, hero's journey starts. Mentor figures die. That has to happen as part of the hero's journey. That is, I mean, that's literature. And his father's not really dead. And so you've got that bit, but he finds a new mentor anyway. And so there's weird little bits that are uncommon and different, and that it makes them a real pleasure to read. And yes, I'm going to save my brother. Whoops! I killed the seneschal. Was definitely another one of those moments
I'm
where
13. Whoops, I've never done anything violent in my life. And very
13 and
first,
I've got 2 arrows left from rabbit hunting.
yes. But he also sees his brother hold the sword for the first time that he'd seen anybody hold it
And
in a
actually wielding
manner
it,
that
yeah.
was of import, right? And that's when we start learning that each sword has its own properties. You know, the sound, the fretful mill saw shrieking of Town Saber,
Yeah.
this particular sword. And honestly, it's all about power with consequences. And that's usually the kind of game that I like to run. So yeah, I'm all over it.
Well, that's the thing, right? All of the swords sort of have their catch, and
Mm-hmm.
we learned that right off the bat with Townslayer, where it will stop it'll defend
Saber.
everybody so long as you're defending the helpless,
Yeah.
but you're still getting hurt and you can still die when it's done, but you won't die until it's done with you.
Yes, it won't let you die until the end of the battle. You will continue holding it, and it
and
will control you and what you do with it.
and
It
that's
is
the thing, right? I mean, these
wild.
are magic swords in like the truest fashion of magic swords. One picks them up, but they wield you. You don't call
Mm-hmm.
upon their power; the power awakens.
And God,
There's that moment. He's standing on the rock with the sword. He's like, "These guys are going to kill me," and nothing is happening because he is wielding a sword that protects the innocent behind you essentially,
mm-hmm.
and
And
he's
you're
only trying to
alone.
protect himself.
Mm-hmm. And God forbid you hold two at a time, even by accident.
And then there was that, right? All of a sudden everything was tingly and strange, and his brain was swimming
And he
because he
passed
was
out.
wielding so much power.
Mm-hmm. And made him pass out from it. And yeah, there were so many. I kind of wish I could go chapter by chapter on this one because there were so many favorite little parts that I really have to rein back for the show. Sorry. Uh, but I will just put this out there. The mask that the Duke was rumored to wear on certain occasions, he played dumb about it, but then they go into his closet and it's hanging right there. It, it's come on, people. But then he says things like, my wizards will take care of this. And it's just that perfect example of pretentious power and presumed royalty.
The Duke is just vile. He really is.
I didn't realize that till the end of the book, but yeah.
That entitled villainy. I felt it sort of ran all the way through when he's talking to Mark's parents. He's like,
Well,
"Oh,
yeah, you don't
don't
you don't
worry,
think
he'll
he's a
be
good
okay." And
guy.
yeah, he's playing good cop, and then they leave, and he's like, "Well, my cousin is still dead, so we will torture and kill them horribly, but it serves us no purpose now because they're giving us the information, and we won't destroy the entire village. We'll torture and kill them as an example to the village because the village is a tool, and we need the income. So we
Yes,
can't afford to kill everybody." It's
villages are tools.
he's a billionaire is what he is, right? He is Jeff Bezos with a sword fixation.
So the Seneschal was out there with Blue Robes, which gotta admit is like one of the most creative names a Duke would ever bestow upon a wizard.
I like Blue.
Um, Blue Robes fakes his own death so that everybody will leave him alone, and then survives to go back to the Duke and report everything. And just, oh man, he. I almost thought that Blue Robes was a little bit, not a little, a lot more evil than the Duke himself, because the Duke was the one saying, "Don't kill them all just yet, because they could still be tools." And
Yeah, that's
man,
Blue Robes didn't see the big picture. He was a little picture kind of guy. But I like the fact he's like, when swords are swinging and arrows are flying, magic generally isn't worth a whole lot. So I just drop prone, and that's what he did. Right, the fight starts. He's like, "Nope, I'm down. I'm just gonna lay here, huddle down on the ground." especially, you know, they were firing arrows. You know, being prone is a good thing, right? Um,
Depends on what game you're playing.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
But I like the fact that when they talk about wizards, when Mark is on the run and he's like, well, I could try and hide the sword, but you know, if the local conjurer at the carnival can do things like find rings that have fallen down a well, what chance do I
Mhm.
have of hiding something from a real wizard? And we later learn that's fairly accurate, right? The wizards, while they don't know the final, you know, the exact location of the swords, they're like, yeah, they're all on the continent. We know that some are over here, and we start learning the various factions that are of humanity that are playing this game, and
Ugh, yeah.
and that's how we get introduced to the Emperor, right? The Emperor brings Mark one of the swords. He brings him Skull Twister, the Mind Sword, the one
Is
that,
that the
that
one?
I think.
Okay.
Wait, no, no, no,
No,
no,
I
no, no. It's
thought it
Sight
was
Blinder.
Coin Spinner.
No, he brought him Sight Blinder, the sort of stealth, because that's what makes you
That's right.
appear harmless. And so he appears, as he's holding the sword, he appears as Mark's father. And then as he
Yeah.
takes the sword, he sees the clown walking back because the Emperor walks the earth with a clown's mask,
Hmm.
which plays out over the next few weeks. The
Yeah.
Emperor's a great character.
It made me kind of wish that Mark's mother had shared some of that insight with him as far as all of the older rumors of who was rumored to go about dressed and or masked as which character.
Well, yeah, but you know, then, but if she
I
did
know, I
that, if she
know,
did
I
that,
know.
she'd be saying, "Hey, you know, so 2 days
There's a
before I got
possibility.
2 days where I got hitched to your dad, I was out in the field with some stranger in a mask after a funeral."
But it was okay. It was like a local custom,
It was a
right?
local. Well, that's why she was supposed to be leaving, right? It's because it was a
She
no
did.
custom. No, she didn't. She was leaving, and
She left one building.
and she was, you know, the hand fell on her arm and
I
said,
know, I know, I
you know,
know.
it's not over yet. Yeah.
Mm,
And she was, I was kind of hot. I was kind of lukewarm on her, you know, kind of hot and cold, right? You know, she was certainly,
a
there
plot
were moments,
device.
there were moments of devotion. And then there was, well, you know, even though he's lost an arm, he still has property, so I guess I should marry him. And so it kind of bounced back and forth a little bit. But
She
I
had
suppose, you know,
she
over
had
13.
emotion for him, but
Yeah,
when in tree falter, you
yeah, well,
know?
that's fair, right? She had feelings
Yeah.
for him and his wallet, but also him. Yeah, but
And he did okay by her. Um, I'm I'm torn on what to bring up next.
well, I liked the shuffling of the swords because that
Yeah.
sort of kept happening, right?
Yep.
Well, so Mark has one sword, then he meets a dragon slayer who has dragon slicer, the sword of heroes, and
Yeah.
it, then they're
That was a
attacked,
great band of NPCs too.
and each of them grabs the wrong sword. Each of them grabs the
Yes.
other sword, because that's the other thing, right? These swords, other than kind of having a neat, like,
Detail.
well, no, they've got like this pattern within the iron itself. They're
Almost it makes me think of Damascus. Yeah.
but, well, Damascus, but lesser. You know, it almost seems, and but they're described as very plain, right? It's a straight blade, it's a straight unadorned crossguard, it's a straight hilt, and there's just
Hmm.
one little band around it that denotes which blade it is. So
Right.
they're not gorgeous blades. They're blades that were made to function. These are not art pieces.
And they're large enough to be
They're large enough to be imparted to a
clumsily
13-year-old boy.
clumsily wielded and or carried while traveling, and all of the ways that you've got to try to figure out how to carry this thing. That gives me a few great ideas myself for future game stuff. But
But yeah, so you know,
all of
they
these,
swap swords, and
yeah,
then so then Mark has you know, the dragon sword, and then the emperor gives him sight blinder, and there's a dragon that is carrying away the other sword. He's like, oh, well, I need to get that sword. So the dragon drops the sword. As it's sweeping down, he stabs it with sight blinder. The dragon flies off with sight blinder still in its side. There's twice in this book, dragons fly off with a sword stuck in their side.
And this explains their hit points. I
This
mean,
explains why dragons probably don't like people, but
yeah,
it's just
that too.
I think it puts into perspective these flying dragons that are so heavily so heavily armored that even when they're pierced with the blade, they don't really notice. I mean, at one point, Drophet goes up and pulls a sword out of a dragon, which doesn't even really notice it's there.
And yeah, those other creatures trying to go for the heart. Well, there was no heart. That didn't help.
Oh, the larva, the larva had no organs at all. Let's talk about those things. Those things were creepy.
Can we not? Oh, sorry. Can we not?
Those things were creepy. They were like, I don't know the best way to describe them. In my brain, they're like these grayish, gelatinous pudding bipeds with, I mean, their arms end in weapons as hard as steel. Their heads are shaped like helmets to take blows to one side or the
Yeah,
other.
because they have handless arms. Yeah.
Yeah, because they end up like blades and clubs and sickles,
Mm-hmm.
and they have no internal organs. And when you lop off their arms keep coming for you. And there's no heart. It just
Yeah.
and when it's
That's like
described as
the
this
best golem
wave,
ever.
this like clay-like wave of these things coming across the swamp,
Yeah.
tens of thousands of them on the march, and and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
there you are with Pound Saver doing your best to just protect this tower with a few locals in it, and there's 100 dead, and it's nothing compared to the horde that is just sort of
The
moved
gray.
around. Oh,
It's like an ooze with arms. Yeah.
well,
Yeah. Slightly more form, but yeah.
yeah, right. They're like deadly gray Jello wigglers,
So bad.
and
So bad.
and of course, who is not present? Drophet introduces us to these things, and then is conveniently gone when all of them attack.
Well, the gods were cursing him for a regretful cur, but
Well, and I do greatly appreciate Nestor. Nestor was the dragon slayer, uh,
he was a
and
good counterpart to Mark's naivete.
yes. But what I really loved the most is there he is. A dragon has swept down. It has grabbed him in its talons and it has flown away. He blacks out. He wakes up and he's still hanging there, flying along. And what is he thinking? He's thinking dragons can't carry a man. No creature that flies can carry a man. We're too big. As a dragon is carrying him away, and that was an experience he really did not like. Because when Drophet is like, I will send you to meet up with Mark, and I'll summon a dragon. It's like, no, no,
No,
no.
that's
I'll
cool.
stay
Well,
here. I would rather
yeah,
stay here for 20 years than do that. So thank you very much, but I'm not getting
I'm good. I'll chill.
it. Just
Yeah, and then he ends up taking him himself, and yeah, uh, yeah. I feel like there was so much to unpack as far as details, and of course that's where my brain goes to, are the details. I got totally absorbed in the scene with the magical chest unlocking. The
yeah,
wizard had to lay his hands on it, and then
it buzzed like a swarm of insects.
it was humming and buzzing, and it had to, the contact had to remain for so long in order to essentially deactivate whatever was going on before the thing would open. And yeah, I am I'm really grooving on stuff like that lately.
Well, and of course, inside that chest is coin spinner, right? The sort of chance, the sort of fortune. And
The
and
lucky
again,
sword, right?
yeah, and again, when we're talking about these swords serve themselves, and when they're done with you, they're done with you. And the sword had been in the possession of a soldier who had been using it for gambling, and he was outside. He had set the sword down, and within 30 seconds of setting it down is when the people he had been playing cards with jumped him and killed him. His luck literally ran out.
Shouldn't
But
have put the sword
he,
down, huh?
he put the blade down. No more
Yep.
luck. It was done with it. And essentially the sword knew where it wanted to be. So the soldier got it to point A. From point A, the woman picked it up, took it to point
Mhm.
B, which was of course the Duke. So yeah, I mean there's a lot going on. These swords are not just bystanders.
And now that it sinks in, that point that you brought up just a moment ago about dragons can't carry people, it's because Nestor was known for being one of the most knowledgeable people in the subject of dragons, because he had Dragon Slicer, one of that other sword.
Well, he was killing
And
dragons before that, but yeah.
right. So he'd known knew all about excuse me, air quotes, knew all about dragons, but didn't know about this part of their lifespan.
I don't think
Didn't know.
anybody knew about that part of their lifespan. Because I mean, what when he's rattling off the various life cycles, it's sort of taken as this is what we know about dragons. It's not just what he has discovered. It is, they call this life cycle this because of this, and this part of the life cycle is this, and he
Hmm.
even says there's cycles beyond. We just don't know them.
Well, and that was what Mark knew, the 13-year-old.
And
Yeah.
that there were cycles beyond what was known, but he just
Hmm.
didn't know that they came to a point where they could pick up people and fly.
Yeah, the legged phase was, from the human point of view, the really dangerous part of a dragon's life.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah, and then they were again supposed to have been leading mostly aquatic life, but nobody
Because they
knew
were so
past that
heavy,
point.
and their
Hmm.
their legs were all shriveled up, and so they'd stay, and that made sense though, right? I mean,
Yeah.
they start almost like little angry pollywogs, right, in the water,
Yes.
and then they get wings, and so then they flit about almost like dragonflies, and they get to about the
Oh,
size of a chicken, and then and then they start the leg phase, and then they go into the snake phase, and
and
it
we
just
get the scene of one of the little mm, mm, what, teenage pollywogs just kind of getting squashed there. That's one less that we have to worry about growing
one
up.
less to grow up and need to be killed. And then
Hmm.
there's the one that's kept in the crate that's angry, but it's so immature that its breath doesn't flame yet, so it's just steaming at them. And I
Yes,
really I
these are
really
the
dug that
images
image.
I live for.
Yeah, I dig the imagery of the little tiny dragon just breathing out steam because it's so furious, but it's so cute.
And
You
you
know,
figure it probably is just a large chicken size at that point.
I don't even know if it's that big yet from the descriptions. I don't know. I mean, yeah, maybe because it is eating frogs.
Hmm.
But I picture it as like picking up a kitten and just going, "Who's so fierce? You're so fierce. You're so fierce."
Oh, this is our life, folks.
Yeah. So, and of course, this is
But it
this
wasn't it
is
wasn't totally angsty ridden.
no,
And
it's not really angsty.
I
So
appreciated that. I was worried about it when I saw he was 13. I was like, oh boy, here we go.
no, he
But
was
it was
13
a
and
nice
aged before Hot
change.
Topic. This was written before Hot Topic and Spencer's existed. You have to understand. You'd go to the mall and hang out at like Hot Sam's for pretzels. Uh, I know this because I mean this came out when I was like 13, 14, and
Wow.
I think I heard about the series. I want to say maybe my junior year from a friend of mine who didn't know how to say the word trilogy because he was very excited about the Swords trilogy.
That hurts my head so
I
much.
know, I know, I know, but he didn't know. And so I dove into them. It was one of those things where, like, the science fiction fantasy book club had the complete book of swords, and so you could get those books. And then when I later found out there was the Lost Swords series, there's 8 of those, right? I mean,
Oh,
yeah, I was
there
totally.
are a lot. Yeah, even in the beginning of this particular book, it gave the entire list. And I was, how many of these do we got to do for the one show?
Well, and so collected, they did the Book of Swords as the trilogy. Then they
Okay.
did the first 3 books of Lost Swords. Then they did
First,
a
second,
collection
third,
of the second 3 books of Lost Swords.
fourth,
And
fifth,
then they did the last 2 together in one.
the
And then
seventh
later
and the
came
last.
the 7th and 8th. And then later there was the short story collection, which was it
Oh,
Song of the Swords or
uh, Armory of Swords.
Armory of Swords? Yeah,
It's the
that's right.
invitational anthology that
That's right, because the Song of the Swords is
Saberhagen
actually
edited.
in the book. Yeah.
Right. The Song of Swords was interesting. I'm really glad the audiobook narrator didn't try to sing it. Um, but no, the eighth book of Lost Swords is actually titled The Last Book of Lost Swords. that that tickles me.
Yeah, no, that's and I think I've only read 6 of the books of Lost Swords. It was a long time ago.
Well, Empire of the East is listed as its own series
It
in the Swords series.
it
I don't
is.
think you need to read it to catch catch on and
Oh
stay
no, no,
with the
not at
book
all.
here.
Not at all. I certainly I'd never even heard of Empire of the East when I read these originally. So
Gotcha.
I mean, with a 50,000 year gap, you can just take the
Mm-hmm.
Ardna as some strange before times god and move on. Uh, so
And
yeah, there's no
Ardna
need.
is Ardna's sword is the very last one then.
Right. Yeah, that's
And
the
I
one.
am curious if we could bounce from the first two Ardnas and still get as much out of it. Probably not. We should just read the whole thing.
Yeah, no, Ardna's Sword came out in 2006, right? It was the last thing published while Saberhagen was alive. So, but the other thing that I really enjoyed, and again, I hadn't read Empire of the East, but I was a D&D player. And so when they're talking about Ardna versus Orcus,
Oh,
I was like,
yeah.
oh, Orcus, woo! And I had no understanding of what Saberhagen's Orcus really was. So
Gotcha.
that was kind of fun. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
So
I think we've kicked this one around quite a bit. I mean, I enjoy it. I would love to continue talking about it, but we'd probably have to go chapter by chapter at that point, and we don't have that much time left.
no, so I think we've covered the book fairly well. So we can move on because
Thank you.
Sanctum Media, in partnership with Ugandan game designer Ashraf Braden, has just released our first in a new line of DCC. I've been referring to them as micro releases or mini zines, and it's the Kokondo. And the Kokondo is a creature of modern folklore and legend. It is literally rumored to hunt sleeping children in the boarding schools of Uganda. And
So creepy, so good.
yeah, so it's a micro release that has the monster as well as stats for a sickle sword that is historically used or historically was used in Uganda. It's 2 sides folded over into a little booklet, and it is a $1 PDF, and it's Ashraf's first RPG release. He's really excited about it uh, because I mean he lives in rural Uganda. There's not there's not a lot of outlets for creativity. He works It literally works checking fishing boats before they go out on the lake to make sure that they have their tag attached, they paid their tax. That
And
is what he does.
before that, he sold motor oil or something.
No, he was working at a farm supply place, coordinating shipments. His goal was to hopefully be able to save up enough money to open up a booth selling motor oil to the motorcyclists in Uganda, because they go through motor oil, and
Wow.
he would need to save up for like a lockbox and things of that nature.
It
And
is a completely different lifestyle than we know.
it is the average wage in his area is like $2.50 a day, and so him being able to express his creativity like this, and tell people about some of the folklore and legends out there has been really exciting for him. So I'm going to
And
drop,
for us, really.
yeah, oh, it's been great for us to read. I'm going to drop the link into the chat. We'll have the link with the show notes as well, and all of the proceeds from it, other than what drive-through takes, are just going to Ashraf. So
And that's an important note.
yeah,
We get
70 cents of your dollar goes to Uganda, and 30 cents goes to drive-through. But but again, even just a couple of them is equal to a day's wages out there. So he's having his eyes opened to being able to make a living this way. And let's face it, apparently, if you live in Uganda, you can make a living as a game designer. You really can't do that in the US.
Does that mean we have to? No, I'm not relocating. I'm sorry.
No.
Too old to pack all my crap. So with that, I think it's time once again to announce a winner along with a pair of giveaways. One for the live audience, the other for all of our viewers and listeners. And that means it is time to enter the Sanctum Secorum's very own
Prize
just do it for
Closet
me anyway.
of Mystery.
Later, do we get it? All right.
But you always have to repeat it for me. You know that.
I don't have to repeat it. That's why there's. So we'll start by announcing the winner of last month's last giveaway, right? I mean, for the holidays, there were a lot of giveaways. And our final giveaway was a copy of A Canticle for Leibowitz by Walter M. Miller Jr., which I think is probably one of the best post-apocalyptic stories ever. And it's post-apocalyptic in ways that you don't really expect. And this month's winner was Eric Young, and we'll be emailing him shortly to get details to mail that out to him.
I think I have his address. It's okay.
And then moving on, we come to tonight's live giveaway. And as a reminder, everyone watching the show is eligible for both the live giveaway and our monthly drawing. So starting out the year and our new season in style, tonight's first prize is going to be another DAW Collector's Starter Pack. It'll be 5 different DAW yellow spines for our lucky winner.
We got some.
Yeah, so that is going to go to the live viewer who can first correctly give the answer to this question.
Oh.
What?
I'm not allowed to talk, so this is all you.
Okay. Beyond the Books of Swords and the Empire of the East, Saberhagon was also well known for his Berserker series. In what year was Fortress Ship the first Berserker short story published? Was it A, 1961, B, 1963, C, 1964, or D, 1967? So those of you that are out there, get those guesses in, or based on the time, yep, 1961, 63, 64, 67. Tony Harger with 1963. That is the correct answer. 1961 was when his first short story sold. 64 was the publication of his first novel. 67 was the first Berserker collection. 1963 was indeed the year that Fortress Ship was published. Good job, Tony. Now, if you're watching the show and didn't win the trivia question, or you're listening to a podcast replay in the lead up to our next episode, You can enter to win our monthly drawing by dropping an email to thehub@Sanctum Media with your name. And entries should have the subject line of Prize Closet of Mystery. So what is this month's prize? It also is a DAW Collector Starter Kit. 5 DAW yellow spines to a lucky winner. So drop us an email and we will announce the next winner on our next show.
Okay. Well, lots of books flying around here. I'm kind of torn. Books are usually a one-way transaction in this house. But it is now time, just before the hour. We're going to ask you, our viewers, what should we read next month? Real quick, before Elena puts the poll up, our choices will be Poul Anderson, The Broken Sword, Fred Saberhagen, The Second Book of Swords. I promise I didn't collate this list. John Bellairs, The Face in the Frost, or John Stakely's Armor.
Still one of my favorite books of all time, and I'd love to tell you about it.
Elena, there we go. What do we read next? Ooh, choices. Man. And remember, you can use those channel points to weigh your votes.
Hey, I'm hoping that Armor wins. Now we've got a tie.
Well, that's where we can weigh our votes. How do we do that?
I don't remember. You told me that channel points could be used, but you didn't tell me how. But
like such a dork.
Well, I watched this play out and cross my fingers. Our next show will be on Tuesday, February 28th. Same time as normal, where we will be discussing. Yes, we will be discussing Armor. Yay! We sent out like 3 copies of this as part of the Christmas giveaways or the holiday giveaways. So it'll be nice to have a chance to talk about that.
Ha. Okay, I guess I'm reading Armor.
And then we can read the Second Book of Swords.
It's all good. How does John Stakely tie into Appendix N? Or is that something we have to wait for next episode to find out?
Wait and find
out. Okay. Clever. I see what you did there. So February 28th, you say?
February 28th, the 4th Tuesday.
Okay. We might have to shuffle March just by a day or something, but yeah, well, we should be good on the schedule. I'm liking it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna post our email address in the chat again. It's thehub@sanctum.media. And yeah, read John Stakely's Armor. Tune in, chat with us about it. And the more people that are in the chat during the show, the more we get to riff off of. So we appreciate all of you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching, and join us again on the Goodman Games official Twitch channel.
Be inspired.